So those are the parts of the college application, the components. Taking a step back from that, the college list itself. This is a huge thing that I think your first interaction with a counselor, maybe besides the bigger group meetings, might be to go in one on one to talk about a college list you have researched.
Yeah.
And for a lot of times, at least at the top Asian international schools, I assume it's time where you crush a lot of dreams.
Yeah, unfortunately.
One of the things you do also is you create bespoke lists for your clients. What goes into your thought process of making lists, and also, when students and parents, sometimes just parents, bring in their list of colleges, what's the common feedback that you give?
Yeah, a lot of times, I guess the biggest issues usually are that they're overreaching, and then I don't have a choice but to bring reality back to them. So sometimes it's brutal. I mean, I try to do it as gently as I can, but I know no matter what I say, it doesn't sound particularly positive. That said, I don't make any lists. I mean, I have the kids do the research. I have the kids come up with a list on their own. Of course, there are things that I put which they may or may not have thought about, and the types of schools, and maybe I may throw out a certain names of schools so that they understand what kind of schools I'm talking about, right? I sometimes use like U.S. News and World Report. I hate rankings, but just for to bring a school name that they hadn't heard of to the forefront, sometimes using a ranking system that everybody sort of accepts as the Bible, even though it's just stupid. um, you know, to have it, oh, it's number 12. Oh, it's above Cornell. Oh, there must be a good school, even though they've never heard of it. I'm just planting seeds. So the most important right now is, I guess the easiest approach to do that is just you scare them to death. Say these are all very, very competitive, but if there's a certain limit in your school for the number of applications, okay, you can reach for those. But there's got to be a safety net. That safety net, whether it's two or three likelies or safeties, whichever word you use, that's something that you really, really need to research, right? Where you have a really, really good chance of getting in, and you will also be very, very proud to go if that's the only school you get into, which is basically an impossibility.
That's a really slim category of schools.
Right? And so I started doing this. I mean, it depends on every year it was a little different, but I used to just say different schools' names in every like presentation I ever did in front of students or parents. It didn't matter whether we're talking about college or not. I would just, yeah, you know that like Beloit is coming, Kalamazoo is coming. Like, oh yeah, that's a great school. Like, Carlton, Minnesota. I visited. It was amazing. Like, just plant a few just names there, and then when they come or when they hear it again, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And that sometimes that happens over 4 or 5 years. Maybe it becomes an acceptable school now that comes into that list of acceptable schools that they'll pay for. But I mean, this is the problem right now is that the kids don't have any safety schools. And the popular safety schools that used to be when you went to school or when you went to school even now, it's different, right? Right.
So if you had an ideal student who's building their college list, they're very amenable, they're very open, they really just don't know. What should they be looking at in terms of like if we have the whole list, how many can I really reach? What is a good kind of number of safeties to have that is kind of respectable? When we're talking about safeties, again, we're talking about schools you would actually go to, not just you're scared you're not going to get into any single school. What is the ideal kind of makeup, do you think, for your list?
Yeah, that's a hard one because it is so competitive, and there is no such thing. There used to be, just even 5 years ago, 10 years ago for sure, there was that middle ground where when I say 50-50, it really was 50-50, and chance there was more like 60-40, 70-30. So if you did, let's say 10's the limit, and you go 3-4-3, then you would have at least like 6 or 7 that you can choose from at the end of the day. But right now, most of the schools that we used to call 50-50, if you do early decision, you get in. If you do regular, it's a reach.
The
It's a
ED
much
bump is
more,
real.
Yeah, it's a more complicated
Yeah.
game now.
Yeah. And then once in a while, a kid who deserves to get in does get in. So it's really, really hard. And so it used to be like 3-4-3, or if it was like 12, maybe 4-5-3 or something like that. But now I'm going to say that's probably the same, but the yield is going to be different. Like how many out of if you do 4-5-3 and you have 12, how many would you get in? Maybe 3 or 4. So it's a different sort of a landscape, so that the safety school becomes really, really important.
Right. Safeties are not safeties really
I mean,
anymore.
those are the ones that those are the only ones you can put money on that you could attend. The rest are just up in the air. Now, if you're like a top student, again, then what is a 50-50? What is a reach? Like, to me, it's the same.
Not much changes.
It's maybe almost even harder to pinpoint for top students.
Probably, yeah. I think there's certain kids who would be more targeted for those specific schools that do those, numbers games. And I've seen that happen where kids are like, other top kids don't get in, but somebody who's a little bit lower get in. But you can't count on that either. So it is blind leading the blind, honestly. Like, if I wish I had the answers on exactly how to do it. But safety has become that much more important. That's one.
And putting effort into those applications, showing that you care.
Yeah. And then, yeah, that's for sure. Right. And so we do, I used to force kids to do those safeties first, right? They have to submit it first. In terms of how I lead them, I mean, I think that's the biggest part of U.S. application process is just there's so many choices. How do you choose? And so if they have friends or family in a specific area, starting from that point and doing that's how I did it with my own son. And even though I've been doing this for a long time, just for my own kid, it's a little bit more pressure for myself. But ultimately, it was like, grandparents, okay, let's drive around within 4-hour radius of it. And that's what we did. We drove like almost 3,000 miles but all within 4, 5, 6-hour radius of Chicago. And so we ended up finding a school that he really liked, and that was it. But without doing that, like, how do I explore the entire continent of the U.S.? It's really, really hard. And so, but unfortunately, there are many, many families that actually don't have any connections to anywhere, to any specific place in the U.S. So we're east or west or center. That narrows it down. I guess no one says south, although UVA and UNC are pretty popular.
Georgia.
Yeah,
Vanderbilt,
Tech.
Harvard South.
Yeah. But so then it's the types of schools, right? And so if they have no idea, then I use those ranking lists, or I just suggest a couple of schools that I really do like for just not that they're paying me. I wish they were. But there are certain schools where I've sent many of my kids to, and it's like 100% customer satisfaction. Okay, so those are the ones that I'll just kind of say out loud and say, oh, look into that. I mean, everybody seems to like it whenever they go.
In your experience, do you also kind of like get the vibe of the student and see like maybe you'll like these schools?
Oh, for sure.
Culture
I mean,
fits.
That I would not suggest, even if it's perfect for somebody else, I would never suggest it for somebody who I don't think would fit necessarily there. And that's more subtle, I suppose. And I guess the more I've done it, and the more schools I've visited, I visited a lot of schools, and it's just part of my professional development. Whenever I travel, I end up going to a school or two, just even if I don't have any specific official purposes for it, just for my own information. And so you get a kind of feel for it. And a lot of times, like, if you just drive through, sometimes you just feel the culture of the place. Like, the political culture these days is very, very pronounced. Yeah. And
If you care about it, look at how the university administration responded.
Yeah.
That'll give you an idea of maybe the type of place you want to go to? Question mark.
I think a question I have then is if making the list has become this nuanced, is it a good idea? Is it helpful and or appropriate for a student to kind of bring in a list early on before beginning of senior year to their counselor and kind of test drive a couple things, get a couple, schools knocked off their list, have some time to kind of like play around with the whole landscape of their list?
Yeah, I mean, like when I work with kids, it's second semester, junior year. I mean, that whole semester, I will be giving them like weekly homework assignments to say, okay, why don't you look into these two? And then as they do research and they stumble across another, I think I might like that one. I heard somebody talk about that. Go ahead, do that. And then just compile like basically an Excel sheet or something with pros and cons and things that they felt and things that they may have heard through whatever resources they stumble across, or if they visited, that would be great. Those kinds of things like that. That is something that I focus quite a bit of time on for
So
sure.
real slow and steady.
Yeah.